Hello and welcome to the JCN Clinic podcast show. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Carissa.
And today we are doing a little bit of a step sideways to talk about the Don't Die film and some of the really interesting questions that it brings up, issues, etc. We're going to dive in deep. I've got lots of thoughts. Chris has got lots of thoughts, I'm sure. We haven't spoken about it together on purpose. Carissa watched it fresh, I think, last night, maybe finishing off this morning. So she's super fresh.
Super fresh. I literally turned it off half an hour ago.
I've watched it once, actually kind of twice, because Damien watched it after me and I was like in the background. So before we dive into talking about this film and a lot of the topics that it brought up, I felt, and then I hit Carissa up, I felt were quite pertinent to the health space overall. How have you been, Rissy?
I feel like we've got to get better at hitting record.
I know, right? Although there's like a level, I think, with the podcast, like we're very open and transparent with our listeners, but there's also a line of probably some of the stuff that we just talked about that, do you want to bring that on the podcast? Or is there a more tapered version?
Yeah, is there a more tapered version of how we're going? Well, I'm going well, Jess. I bought a new podcast. I bought a new podcast microphone for anyone who's interested. So if anyone wants to comment on whether or not my sound is better, I would love to know, or if it sounds the same. So that's exciting in my world. Did a little bit of research and found a microphone. Had a bit of a meltdown yesterday about cords and how things plug in and work.
Did Mick help you, or were you by yourself?
I actually worked it out on my own, so I was pretty proud of myself.
So
but he
proud.
was here and he did come in and try and talk to me about stuff, but you know when you're kind of like already feeling dumb and frazzled by technology and then someone just comes in and talks over the top of you about other things, I was just like
he would have bit his head off.
I was just like, you're not helping me right now. I don't need a technical explanation. So I got a new microphone, so that's exciting. And we're like, what are we, week 3 in clinic now, back at work?
Yep. And it's been interesting with clinic, hasn't it? Always is this time of year. Everyone's in holiday mode still. School's not back yet, and this week has been a really classic one for us because we've got the Australia Day, Invasion Day, whatever you want to call it, long weekend ahead. Let's just say the long weekend ahead.
Yeah, I just call it a long weekend these days.
It has.
What are you doing for the long weekend?
Yeah. So that sort of impacts, doesn't it, the clinic as far as, bookings and so forth. Or Carissa and I both, as usual, went into the week with a very overly full booking diary, and then it died a little bit in the arse.
It 100% did. Oh my God, 100%. I didn't feel so bad. I always feel less bad about my week when something like that happens, when I jump on and see it happens to your week. I don't know why, but if I'm like, well, if it's happening to both of us, I won't take this personally.
That's so true.
Steph said the same thing, because we obviously had all these gaps and we're trying to fill them, and none of them got filled actually. So my week just kind of, filtered out a bit and became quite a quiet week, which is great because you get other things done. Like I bought a podcast fucking microphone, which probably wouldn't have happened for 2 months otherwise.
True.
And I got some other things sorted for the podcast and sent some emails off. So I love those I do love those weeks when they do happen, because you get other stuff done, which is great. But Steph did say to me, she's like, don't feel bad, it happened to Jess as well. And I jumped on and I'm like, okay, fine. Okay. I'm okay with that.
So true. And we've always said right from get-go, it happens for a reason. I've always, in the earlier years of business, and this might be helpful for young practitioners who listen to the show. I used to initially freak out if I had a quiet week. And I know when Carissa first started with me, there was chats that we had about that. But there are going to be ebbs and flows of what comes with being a practitioner, with life for people generally being more busy, and it's not the right time for them to be focusing. And when you have that time that gives you downtime, instead of panicking about it, using it effectively, because I can tell you a few weeks later, when you're booked the eyeballs, you're going to wish that you used that time instead of just stressing out.
So true. Oh my gosh. I actually feel like, too, interestingly, this is just my little spiritual take on it, I feel like the quiet weeks for me always happen when I need them, like,
Yeah.
which is crazy because you do, like, as a early practitioner, a young practitioner, new on the scene practitioner, I should say, you really sweat it and you think like, oh, what am I doing wrong? What should I be doing better? And all these things. And then when you actually become a bit seasoned and veteran like Jess and I, and realize that it's just the ebbs and flows of business and life, and just embrace the quiet time because you can get other stuff done. But I always find they happen for me when I need them to, whether I've got stuff going on in my personal life and I actually need a fucking breather, or I'm just feeling a bit under the weather myself, like just still getting over this virus from Christmas, like we were just talking about before. Like this week was a good one for me because I got other things done, but I don't actually know how I would have gone with the mental load of a full week of clients because I'm still not 100%. So I kind of was like, okay, I can take this. Love it.
Yeah. So agree. No, I've always felt like that it just always seems to happen at the right time.
Yeah.
And you go into it the week not knowing that, but by the end of the week or even the week after, you're like, oh, okay, I understand why I had that
I understand now, universe. Thank you. Thank you. Steph says the amount of times I talk to the universe is like, she's like, you always say something, you're like, take that back, universe. I'm talking, mate.
Did Steph tell you about the post that I put up? It went live. Yeah, she obviously did by your reaction.
Comment on social media.
I haven't looked this morning. I haven't even looked.
Oh my God. Yeah, she did.
She was she couldn't even speak when she rang me. She was beside herself, hysterical. Damien was in the other room. He could hear and he was like, what is going on? I haven't heard anyone laugh like that in forever.
Laughing when she was explaining to me. She's like, oh, you could come over here and actually see the post with like the fist bumps and the thing anyway. So I actually didn't realize it was going to go on our socials today. So when I saw it, I laughed all over again. But the funniest thing was, how you slide through. Because I was saying to Steph, I'm like, in Jess's defense, so if anyone wants to have a look at the post, it's the one about portion sizes on a plate, like how to create a macro balance plate. But you've got to understand the context of it is that when Jess and I studied, this is how they explain stuff to us. So
I still use it for clients.
Right, yeah. So that's what I was saying to Steph. I said, but because Jess has probably been explaining it so many times over so many years, she just now has this blunted version of it that's quick, precise, and to the point, and that's what's come through in this post. And Steph's like, but it doesn't even fucking make sense. She's like, when you scroll through to the end, this is the bit that fucking got me. And at the end of your post, you always say, was this helpful? And then it's like share or whatever. Steph read it and she goes through it and she's like, was this helpful? No, Jess, it was not.
It was helpful. It gave her a good laugh.
This came out this morning and I flicked through it. All I could hear was her voice in my head. Oh my God, it's the best post ever. Because I understand where you're coming from and I understand where Steph's coming from. It's just like it hasn't met in the middle like it normally does.
So in clinic, guys, what we'll often do as a really rudimentary way of explaining portion sizes is use hands as a guide. So when people, and I do this all the time still. So if someone's like, how much carbs, how much protein, I'll like give them a visual. I'm a visual person too, so I think that's why it clicks with me. So how much, yes, sign language, as Steph said it. So 2 fists, like roughly 2 fists to equal a portion of veggies, or 1 fist, closed fist to equal like the portion of a carbohydrate, and so on. And I found instead of like saying to a client like a gram amount, and clients like, I don't know how much that is, like unless you get people weighing things, which sometimes we do. It's been like a really basic starting point, and I am so blunted to it now I don't even think about it. But when Steph saw it and the way the language was initially, because I had to change it, she was like, it sounds like you're telling people to eat their fingers or eat their palm.
And honestly, it kind of did. Like when Steph read it out to me, and that's what I said, I'm like, Jess has just kind of dumbed this down over the years, not dumbed it down, but just consolidated, because she's probably so sick of saying it and just explaining it that it's just now this succinct guideline to her that makes 100% sense, but to the layman's or like someone who's very new to the space or someone who, you know, isn't reading between the lines. Oh my God, we did have a really good laugh about it yesterday. I'm not gonna lie, it was
I hadn't even
great.
looked at it. There you go. Well, no, that's not even. It's actually quite small. Like as far as like the pictures and stuff, maybe people haven't looked at it. It's
now,
like fist bumps now. There you go. We got people saving it, so someone's like that's helpful. Anyway, go and have a look, guys. Let us know what you think. I'd be really curious to hear. But I was like, this is going up no matter what. Now this is just too funny.
I fucking lost it this morning when I saw it up there. Don't worry, I was like, what? It is good, and it makes sense to me as well. But I love it where Steph comes from with it, because she is right. Because to someone who, has never really had to hear that before, she would have just been like, "What?" Anyway, it was great. Yeah, it was pretty good.
Oh man. Anyway, we better get into this topic of today. Hey, so. As I said earlier, we're going to talk about this newish documentary that's been released on Netflix called Don't Die. Some of you may have seen it. If you haven't, we're going to explain what it's about. And obviously that will bring context to why we want to talk about it. But essentially it's about an entrepreneur and also a self-made billionaire, I would imagine. Yeah, billionaire, called Bryn Johnson, who is on this absolute quest to discover eternal youth, essentially, and optimal health, longevity, and he is essentially using his life as a science experiment. It's very N=1 as far as like how he can do everything within his grasp and within his realm of financial reach, which is exponential, and that's what's interesting about it, to turn the clock back or to slow the aging process as much as possible. But also, again, which I think is fascinating, is in the realms of what that means with health, what health looks like, and where these different lines sit for different people. He's super controversial, that's for sure. I'd be interested with you to see how much you knew about him when I brought up the documentary and said to go watch it. Like, I'd heard of him, but I didn't know a lot about him. Did you know much?
Absolutely nothing. So I recognized his face, which was just a little snippet when you sent it through, and I looked it up quickly on Netflix and saw like a 5-second trailer, which was the part where he wasn't going out in the sun, and that's why I said, oh, he looks quite vampire-like. He was so pale, so white. But honestly, I knew nothing about him, which was good going into it, I think. So I didn't have any preconceived notions about the controversy that does surround him and what he does. Obviously the documentary, I suppose he's obviously had some hand in producing it, I would imagine, because it's very centered around him and all of that. But I didn't know who he was. I'd heard of him, heard the name, but didn't actually realize that that's what the name was about. So no, I was pretty blind going in. So, and to be fair, my initial thought was, is this going to be another like what the health thing where it's just this blanket bias? And there's quite a few of them coming out on Netflix.
There is.
And I just don't watch them personally because I just can't be bothered to get infuriated. So I did kind of think, oh God, Jess, is this going to be one of those? Which it wasn't. I'm glad. But that was sort of my first thought. So I knew nothing about him, had a quick look, and I was like, oh no, this is just going to be one of those crazy bloody health documentaries that have been written by someone who's just got an invested interest in some sort of diet, and I'm going to get really frustrated watching it, which I didn't. So anyway, that's that.
Yeah, I agree. He definitely has those Edward Cullen vibes when you first see him, doesn't he? Yeah.
Actually, even more the father, the doctor father in Twilight.
Yeah. That's so true.
That's what I thought at first. I was like, oh, this is kind of hot now. Hot vampire doctor guy.
No, I was the same as you. I knew of him, but I didn't know much more about it. So going into it, it was very with open sort of like mind of like what this is going to be about. And I really did appreciate how it, which we'll get into, sort of came from all angles. As Carissa said, like he was definitely involved in this. So you've got to keep that in mind. But there were producers and directors that had been following like right from the start that wanted to document the process. And you do hear a lot about their thoughts along the way. But essentially what you see when you watch the film is they'll very much, the documentary I should say, they set it up to show you initially what a day looks like for him or what his life looks like. And this is the part of like what is so, I guess, triggering to a lot of people, and also creates a lot of hate and a lot of questions. But it's super, super regimented from like the moment he puts his head on the pillow, even while he's sleeping, and how he records his sleep, documents his sleep, is all wired up when he's sleeping, through to the moment he wakes up and the way his morning is structured and all of the protocols of his morning. The pretty extreme handful of vitamins that he takes in the morning, his exercise regime, you see when he eats and what he eats, the minimal amount, which I'm sure will be something we'll talk about. Potentially there's a part in the documentary where they ask him about his food and he says that he's actually always hungry, and one of the saddest parts of his day is when he finishes the last bite of his second meal. I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
So his day-to-day like is very structured with all of the general routines of what he needs to do to optimize his health on a daily basis. But then on top of that is these additional layers of these therapies that over the years have become part of what he does and where he's starting to push boundaries. So there's these sort of, I kind of look at it as like there's even interesting from our point of view of health of like these more foundations of what are his foundations, but then these like additional layers over the years that he's brought in as well, which become perhaps more and more challenging. But then are they challenged? They are challenging because they're new, and are they something that is part of a future that we just don't know yet?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, how did you feel? Like, yeah, what were your sort of feelings when you were watching it and you were seeing that daily routine, even like before talking about those like additional therapies?
Look, I honestly didn't feel super triggered, to be fair. Like, I kind of watched it. I think for anyone who hasn't watched the documentary, like, this guy's objective is to he states it clearly at the start, is to get rid of his self-destructive behavior and even just educate society on self-destructive behavior, but also just to neutralize aging, but based on what almost like biometrics and his body's, data is asking for, more so based on what his mind actually wants.
Yes.
So that's made very clear at the start. So I think that too kind of took away, that was interesting. So I was like, yeah, cool. Okay, this makes sense. You're literally just going based off science, what your body's asking for. So look, it's strict and it's extreme, but I didn't find it triggering to watch. I was super interested. I'm super interested in how dedicated he was to it too, as well. And just obviously, yeah, the process behind what he was doing and why he was doing it. It's definitely extreme. Like, it's too extreme for I would say the normal person or the average person to adhere to or do, because you need a medical team around you. You have to have like this almost, he's got a medical center at his home. He's got a team of scientists that are advising him of what optimal data looks like and things like that. So, yeah, but I don't know. I didn't find it triggering. I was like, okay, this is interesting. Let's see where this goes. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, the same, but I didn't find it triggering in that I felt like I wanted to scream at the TV in any capacity. I just felt deeply intrigued as far as like what was driving him. And then, yeah, I felt, I don't know, like it definitely raised questions in me about like the level that we as individuals choose to go to. And I definitely, like, there's so much, I think, hate that he does receive, as far as like that's not living life, like as far as, you know, what he does day to day. But then I guess the documentary I felt it made a good point, and maybe this is him being involved with it, of showing that he still does have a life, and he has created this community that he is pretty involved with, and his relationship with his son. Like you can see there are relationships, and that he gets out and he does things within the realms of what's important to him. Yeah. So I thought that was really good to see. But I did find I found it interesting that there was that part of me that was still thinking about, like, you know, this level of this like end of the extreme. And for me, thinking about if that was me, how happy would I be? Like this concept of overall perfect health and creating longevity of life as long as you can. But also, where does happiness sit within that framework? But then that's such an individual concept from person to person. So I found that interesting, as far as like being challenged by that. It's like, but that's your, like, what are my truths to what make up happiness for me? Like that I'm not Brian and Brian's not me.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's interesting, like all the flack and stuff he was copying about people saying, oh, you're not truly living. But this, to me, I was like, well, he is, because this is living for him and this is his definition of happiness. Like if he's got the money to spend and he wants to spend it investing in his own health, and I know this is probably us coming from a biased point of view because we do this not to the extreme that he does, but in our health space, like there's levels and layers of this everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I just think like it's not up to anyone else to define what living is for someone else, but also what happiness is for someone else. Like to me, like even before the end of the documentary, like I could see he was passionate about what he was doing. He's so data driven. He obviously looks like he's some sort of tech entrepreneur background. So he loves that, lives and breathes that space. I know there obviously was the flag raised over, you know, then he started selling products. So people were saying it is that classic, you know, tell people there's a problem, then create the solution to fix it. He's not the first person to do that. It didn't seem like again, we haven't followed his online presence the whole way, but to me, it wasn't a product push in any way, shape or form. He actually genuinely did seem really invested in what he's doing and the data that it can provide. And he's not really, like, I don't believe he's just talking about what he's doing. He's not out telling people they have to do it.
No, he's not hurting anyone.
He's not hurting anyone. So if that's what you want to spend your millions of bloody dollars on, I'm kind of like, go for it, man. Like, I'm interested. Like, what are you doing? What are you going to...
And what will he discover? Like, what will you discover? For putting himself at the edge of science, that may be amazing tools for us in the future. I feel like the other component too that, you know, obviously drove him, which I wanted to definitely talk about, was his background. You mentioned it earlier. Like he actually came, you know, we talk about happiness. He came from a place of deep unhappiness, of really being at the point in his life where he was so unhealthy and so unfit and very depressed, and starting to question if he even wanted to live. And then the lifestyle that he was leading as a really like a tech bro, and the lack of sleep, and how he was abusing his body with the food and the alcohol and so forth, and making that choice within his own mind to take that step, I just find so powerful. And I feel like this is something that relates heavily to what we deal with clients, and even in our own lives in a different realm, like not at that extreme, but in how you make a choice to take the step into a different realm and to turn your life around. Like that ultimately that is a choice for everyone. But then also, like, that's one aspect, but then the other aspect, which this was the part that really got to me, or like really, if anything riled me up, it was this concept of like so much vitriol and hate because of the fact that he chose to live this healthy life. And what we consider the norm is that it is more normal to live the life as the tech bro with the poor diet and the lack of sleep and the alcohol and the drugs, that as a overall population, particularly in our culture, that type of lifestyle is what's acceptable, and we don't question that. And yeah, 100%. It's like, this is what is normal. And we see that on a different level, tapering down into clinic, where people are dealing with just their daily families or their daily situation, where they're wanting to make choices for their health to be a better version of them, but they're challenged by the people around them that are like, oh, well, you know what, like, why are you doing that? Why are you disrupting our life by choosing to not eat that? Or you don't want to drink, or whatever those choices are. And they're made to feel bad for that. Like, that was a big piece of this that spoke to me, like, I guess, as a nutritionist and with what we do.
Yeah, 100%. No, I agree. I literally came out of it thinking, like, there's so many people globally that think he's extreme. There's so many people in my circle that think I'm extreme. And I'm not Bryn Johnson. I'm not doing what he's doing. No. I'm not even doing, I probably got a 60% of what he started doing, which is just a good morning routine, some basic supplements, a good exercise routine, a good sleep thing, like, you know, and I'm not doing it and tracking it the way he is, but that's just the foundations to health and warding off, you know, lifestyle and cardiometabolic disease. Like, he's just gone and, I don't even want to use the word extreme, but he's just gone all in, and he's tracking it with every fucking ounce of his being. But it's crazy, the hate that creates. I was actually, again, trying not to be judgy, but some of the people that were commenting about, like, from the hate circle, I'm like, mate, I could pick you to pieces right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, in the same thing, but we're not doing that. Like, he's just on his journey. He's not hating on you for what you're doing in your journey. I don't know. I agree. And I do think too that there's a lot of that in our client space. Even in our own personal spaces, right? Like, I know I get told what I do is extreme. Sometimes even Mick and I talk about it. I don't think what I do is extreme at all. But to other people, it definitely is. Like, because sometimes Mick and I'll have a conversation about something health related or diet related or whatever, and he has to remind me. He's like, you have to remember you're in your bubble, and that the good majority of people don't live like you live. Because we'll be talking about maybe, you know, something going on in his office space or, you know, workspace where, you know, it's just this, you know, and anyway, so I do, sometimes I'm really reminded of that. And then watching this, I was like, well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They're kind of like the Bryn Johnsons, but just not.
Yeah, exactly.
different layers of it.
Yeah. And that's where I think this is really interesting, is how it filters down to the everyday life, because not all of us are billionaires and at this level. Like, if you and I tomorrow were billionaires, like, what would we do? Like, how would we, as people who are invested in health and well-being, I'm sure there would be additional things that we would do if we had them at our fingertips. Would we go to his level? Probably not, but I'd certainly love to be able to do more if I could. But then to go back to that, and to, like, the context of, like, clients and people listening who find it challenging when you're making choices to the better of you, it's, I think, thinking about why other people are triggered by that, and why that, then how that affects you. And I mean, I look at it, I think ultimately when people are triggered by this, it's because it is holding up a mirror to them, as far as, like, their, I'm going to say in quotation marks, kind of like their bad habits or things about themselves that, you know, maybe they know that aren't the best, but they're never going to change, or they don't have the ability within themselves to change. So it's easier to make it seem, again, the normal, this is normal, and, like, put the pressure back onto the person wanting to make the change. So ultimately hoping that they'll come back to what they consider the norm, so they don't have to feel uncomfortable. I don't know, like, whether you agree, like, maybe I'm looking into it too much, but I often feel like I see that with clients in a, like between a husband and a wife, or between, like, friendship groups, like when you get that feedback about people wanting to make change and feeling judged.
Yeah, I've had it with clients so much, for sure. I also think too, people are just, like, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And the mirror thing, and everyone, you know, doing all the online stuff and But I also think too, people have just become so quick to throw their opinion into the fucking arena too. Like I know we're doing it right now. But you know, but in terms of a really quick and judgy way, like if we just kind of like telescope out, like instead of lens in on everything that he is doing, because it's a lot, and most people are never going to be able to do that, have the time in their day to actually be able to implement a health regime like that. Whether or not it would even interest them to do it is another thing. Do you know what I mean? Like they may not want to be that level of healthy or that level of, you know, commitment and things like that, and that's fine. But, you know, telescope out, if he influences a handful of people to positively change their lives in some way, shape or form, because they see that, okay, he's not drinking alcohol, or he's not eating, you know, ultra processed food, and he's taking some good quality supplements, and he's going for a walk every day, or he's sleeping 8 hours a night, and they implement 2 or 3 out of the 100 things that he's doing to look after his health, and they implement 2 or 3 of those things, and it positively changes their health. And the ripple effect of that is that it positively changes 2 things in their spouse's life, and maybe plants a seed in their children's mind of, okay, well, I can, you know, I think, like, where's the harm in that? Like, that's what I look at it. I look at it like, I'm just like, you know, it does seem extreme to a lot of people, and it is an extreme way of looking after your health. And I know a lot of people may not even ever want to do that. And even if I was a billionaire, would I do what he's doing? Probably not. But like you, I would 100%, I would check. There would be more things I would do. I would love to have more time to put into my health.
What would you do? What would you do? Well, I'm curious.
Let me think. Gosh, I've never even thought about having that much money.
Like,
I would have like my home would be like my sanctuary. Like it would just be like this beautiful treehouse rainforest. With like a pool and a gym and a sauna. I would still do a lot of my own cooking, but I would also have a chef for sure. I would take all the good supplements. I'd have more of a morning routine for sure. But I think like, so he's gone and invested his time and everything into his own health and doing all of that. I think I would go back to community. Like I think for me, like I've always wanted something like if I had exponential amount of money and time and I didn't need to make money to live anymore, you know what I mean? Like to say I was fucking set up. Someone said, here's $1 billion, you're right, blah, blah, blah. Like I don't know if $1 billion would see us out to the end of our lives anymore. But anyway, I would set up a community center with health education and help people at the level where they can't afford it. You know what I mean? Like that's what I would do if I had an exponential amount of money. So even though I'm not doing what he's doing, I still think, you know, if you've got a massive amount of money, if you do some good with it, like, so obviously like my home would just be insane. Everyone would want to come and hang out at my treehouse sanctuary. But they'd only be allowed in small doses because, you know, too many people in my energy field just gets too much. But I would have a staffy rescue, of course. But yeah, I think I'd set up a beautiful community center, you know what I mean? But it would still be that emphasis on how can we prevent lifestyle related disease, because that's our biggest killer. And they do say that in this. We all know that lifestyle based disease, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cardiometabolic disease, or insulin, all that whole space is lifestyle based disease. And if we can get in and start positively looking at ways to change that and influence that in the preventative space, mate, we'll change the health of the world in so many ways. You know, and he's just doing that in his own way. Whether or not he set out to do that intentionally, I don't think he did. He was just first, it was all about his own, you know, parameters and what he can push and change. And then they put it out to the world. But, you know, by the end of it, he's, you know, out running with people and he's got this little community and he's, I think it's really sweet. Like he's made friends by the end of it. He's kind of like a quirky little nerd, isn't he? That kind of that kind of hasn't like clicked and found his people or his purpose, and then he's found his purpose now. Like, and it might not be what everyone agrees to be a purpose or happiness, but it's his and it's fine. And now he's got community. Anyway, I thought it was really sweet. Like I was like, oh, look at you go. So anyway, I go off my tangents. But yeah, what would you do if you're a billionaire, Jess?
Same but different. Definitely having that like home environment set up with all of the things. It's interesting. I was thinking it's kind of it almost reminds me of to the level of like being a professional athlete, like in that you would have all of the things at your fingertips as far as like the the saunas, the personal PT, like a physiotherapist, like everything to help with like the recovery of your body,
massage,
for like the
everything.
training that you would like be able to do infinitely, which excites me.
Yeah.
And like all of those routines that you would, it's like when I think about being on holidays and how I don't have to think, I can just do everything that I want and take all of the time that I want. But yeah, I do find it fascinating as far as like the level that you would go to. I feel like I would probably, I don't know how I would go as far as like the additional therapies that he takes on, as far as, which is where I really appreciate what he's doing for him. But as far as like the pushing the boundaries of the gene therapies, for instance, where really we do not have the science as far as outside of animal studies, which is something that they definitely question on his behalf in this documentary, to know how this is going to affect humans long term. So like, again, I totally appreciate and respect that he's putting himself on the line for this. Like, God, imagine the things that he could discover to help
exactly. And he's
with
not
disease.
Exactly, but he's a smart guy. He's got a team of professionals guiding him about what is a potentially smart decision, what is a smart decision, what could come with side effects. And if he's still going to do it anyway, like, go for it. Like, he's not dumb. He knows that there's potential risks. And like you said, if he fucking uncovers something amazing in the process, great, fantastic. He's just, the scientific community, like, he's not really helping us. He's not contributing to science because this isn't a clinical trial. Yeah, we get that. But what if what he does actually pushes a clinical trial through quicker because of there's so many like possibilities. And if he's willing to do that, knowing all the risks and stuff involved, then I don't see a problem with it. Sorry, back to your billionaire dream. I'm still interested.
I feel it's no, I think it's pretty similar. I don't know, I wouldn't have a tree house, let's be honest. I wouldn't have a tree house.
My tree house would be fucking huge. It'd be more like a jungle. If I had $1 billion, it would be a jungle.
Mine would be like this. It'd be the opposite for you. Like, no, that's not true. I'd be in the bush for sure, but it'd be like this, like, beautiful kind of bespoke grand design style building that you see, where they're like super modern with like all of the glass that looks out. Actually, kind of like take his house and put his house in Warburton. I'd be happy pretty much, like, with everything that he has.
You'd have all the eco stuff, I imagine, too. Like, the glass panels would actually be solar panels charging up things, and that would filter through and like water your veggie patch. Like, my jungle would be like that as well, but more like, I'm thinking Robinson Crusoe style, like a bit more rustic. Yours sounds very like
but the other thing that you touched on too that I thought was really interesting, and maybe this relates back to some of the, when we talked about ages ago, the What the Health film and some of these other films that are coming out. And again, what we see in clinic, we see in our society a lot, is disease prevention versus like just treating people when they're sick. Like, it's just, and this comes up in the documentary as far as like what he's doing and trying to achieve for himself, but also challenging the notion of like being well and being in optimal health, so that we aren't a nation that is sick and aging with cardiovascular disease and dementia and a lot of these disease processes that we're understanding more and more and more come back to ill health. And then obviously like the massive empire of like money that's made off our ill health too. But yeah, I find that that's another thing, like as a nutritionist and what we do, I find that I'm so passionate about. And unfortunately we still see this, like, I don't know, is it getting better? Like, if you think about the last decade, like, are we seeing people getting more proactive with their health? Like, I don't know, like sometimes I'd say yes. And there's more of an interest. Like it's definitely become almost quite, but in a certain realms, it's become quite trendy online, and how people are getting into like, you know, bro science and so forth. But then we see a lot still, unfortunately, as far as kickback with how we work and how we aim to help our clients, and how we're often met by the medical model. Not everyone, but still a large percentage of the time, that aren't really invested or interested in helping people from the point of view of like preventative health. It's like, come back to me when you're sick.
Come back to me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
I agree.
What do you think?
I do. I think, yeah, I do. It's such a big one to tackle. I think, I do think there's definitely some steps in a positive direction in terms of the preventative health step space. I also think though too, I don't know if it's just because of the space we work in, and there's just more people interested in it now, and there's more social media, and there's more influencers, and there's more, you know, like influencers spruiking health and things like that. So I like to think that there is, but then you and I work in the real world, and we still see the kickback, and we still see that even though I think people are genuinely more invested in being healthy, they're still just as fucking confused as ever.
Yeah.
They still actually don't, like, I think we've come in a direction where there's a larger population of people that are maybe questioning what has been deemed normal and want to move into this preventative health space and want to look after themselves. But then with what's happening on social media and everyone having a voice and everyone having a diet that you must follow for this and blah, 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 I think people are still just as confused, if not more confused. And they come through, like, I know I've got clients that come through my door and they're interested in the data. Like they, you know, they're all these things, but they're still not healthy because they're fucking confused.
So
and
true.
Sometimes too, they've got all this information, but they still haven't in a way been able to implement it in a positive way because they've just been overloaded with it. Now they're just confused and they've tried a few things, but actually committed to nothing. And I'm not going to say that's for everyone, but that's a lot of people, like, you know, a lot of people that are genuinely trying to help themselves that are just confused by the noise, which I know we come back to a lot. And it's just that, but then it's just that, just get rid of the fluff and come back to the foundational stuff, which, you know, I do think if you go at the start of the documentary, for anyone who has watched it or is going to watch it after we've talked about it, a lot of his foundational stuff is there. You know, he's eating, he looks like he's doing fasting because he's not eating past 11 o'clock in the day. And he says he is vegan of his own choosing. But then you look at his supplement list and he's taking amino acids and every goddamn nutrient under the sun. Which is, you know, fine. That's for his own, what he's doing with all of his tracking and stuff. But his foundational stuff is get up, have a good morning routine. You know, I want his LED bloody mask that he sleeps with.
Oh,
my
yeah,
God,
how cool is that?
That's what I'd buy if I was a fucking billionaire, one of those. But, you know, he does have this first and foremost emphasis on what you and I always talk about to be foundational health.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like sleep, a good morning routine, good food. His food's obviously quite different to what you and I talk about, but we're talking about nutrition for people that aren't taking 20 or 50 supplements. We're talking about whole food nutrition, trying to get the most of stuff from food, you know, good sleep, good movement. Yeah. So I don't know, like, I think, but a lot of people get drawn away from that and they get confused by all the noise. So I think the preventative health space is taking off, but I still think a lot of people are confused and disillusioned by what that actually means. And I also think we're still getting a lot of pushback from the medical system. Like vitamin D's now being taken off the Medicare list. I don't know. Have you noticed that in the last few months?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
So, you know, and that's fucking annoying for us because now you have to pay $50 to get your vitamin D tested. And it's one of the most important nutrients for your hormones, one of the most important nutrients for your immune system. And now your GPs, it's not the GP's fault. Medicare and the government has literally changed what they're allowed to do with that. So now you've got to pay for it if you want it. So it's kind of like we get a few steps forward, but we also get a lot of steps back. So yeah, I feel like it's a hard question to answer, isn't it? Like,
it is.
It
is. And I don't know if, it's not even about there being the right answer. Like it's just more about it raising these different, different sort of ways or viewpoints of looking at this, and hopefully opening up the conversation with people who are listening or thinking about this. And how they might consider approaching things a little differently. Like I really love what you're saying about, with so much information out there and people wanting to invest and do things for their health, how much they're still kind of paralyzed in what they should actually be doing, or they're like, they're doing certain things, but they're still in a state of, like, when we see them, we're like, this is actually still a state of relative ill health. Like, you're not actually helping yourself with what you're doing. And we do see so much of that, which ironically has now come from maybe, like, say, like a decade ago, just not understanding what to do in any capacity, and there being such a lack of understanding of health, to now there being such saturation thanks to social media of so many different factors that people are like, kind of like, I just think about these paralyzed. I think of like a rabbit in the headlights.
Yeah, 100%.
When you go spotlighting and they're just paralyzed. It's just like so much information and they're so confused. And I guess even when you look at with the Doco, how people, as you said, he has his products that he does sell through the website and people purchasing his extra virgin olive oil, which is great. It's extra virgin olive oil. But again, it's like, if you have that and add that to your life, great. But having that shot of your extra virgin olive oil, it's like, it's just things that people grab. It's like, this will do it. But it's like, no, you also remember the basic foundations of what he's doing. And even I wrote it down somewhere, like when I was looking at some info about the Doco, and the guy, Chris Smith, who was the director, he said most of the benefits that Bryan receives from this endeavor is through sleep, diet, and exercise.
Yeah, epic.
Right.
I also think it's interesting, I was literally about to go on a bit of a tangent, but you kind of have touched on anyway, that the minute they launched what he was doing out to the world, that all the supplements, they hyperlinked his supplements that he was taking, and then they sold out everywhere. So this wasn't a push for him to make. Obviously, then they said he was getting kickbacks from Amazon, but I don't think that was in the initial launch of everything, like it looks like. But it's just, again, people are just like, okay, well, if this guy's doing this for longevity, I'm just going to take all of these supplements and it'll fix everything. It's like, no, like the supplements are great, but exactly what you just said there, like most of his kickback or most of his health is due to diet, sleep and exercise. Was that what you just said?
Yeah.
Like, so again, like I think people, again, we're just in this quick fix paralyzed state of preventative health, where people still don't want to commit to and do the foundational work, which is really frustrating, because that's where the preventative health actually comes from. You could do what Bryan's doing and you could take 57 supplements, but if your foundational stuff is not right, and I think the other, I'll finish this first because my brain goes all over the place. Obviously, you guys know that by now, listening to me speak on podcasts. But if the foundational stuff's not there, there's no point in taking the 57 fucking supplements, right?
Yeah.
But also, I think where the credit is due to what Bryan is doing, and I know a lot of people disagree and say that it's extreme and no one can live their life like this. He committed to doing it, right? He's 2 years in now, or 2.5 years in now. He has committed to everything that he's doing, and he's doing some extra stuff with gene therapy and stuff like that, but the foundational stuff hasn't wavered. And so he's seeing all these changes. He's in optimal health for 98 or something, 99% of his, nutritional and health biomarkers and stuff but all of that, but just that dedication and that commitment to health is something that a lot of people don't have. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying you have to be as committed as Bryan. You know what I mean? You don't even have to be as committed as you and me. Like, we've still got shit we can work on. Don't get me wrong. But it's that commitment to time and consistency. People are so quick. Someone's doing an anti-aging thing. Here's the product that's doing it from them. Here's the 10 products they're taking. I'll just go and buy those.
Yeah.
Commit to the foundational stuff first, which, I think it was really interesting. That really stood out to me on the documentary. Instead of people adopting his lifestyle programs and patterns straight away, they just went and bought all the supplements that he's been taking.
It's classic, right?
It's classic. And it's just like, come on, guys. Like,
as we've always said, it's the unsexy stuff.
It's the unsexy stuff. But again, that's where I think there's this genuine interest that people do want to be healthier and they do want to live longer, but again, all the foundational and just the boring stuff, you know, that we talk about all the time, it just gets lost in translation a lot of the time too.
Yeah.
I don't think it's lost in translation in this documentary because they do put a lot of emphasis on it. And community, I love that he talks about that. At first I was worried he was going to be a bit lonely, and then his son comes into it, his dad, and he's got his little community of, you know, people that he's going for walks on at the end. And, you know, and look, I know some people will comment and say it's culty and it's a God complex and all that and whatever, but he's getting people out walking up fucking hills.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Is it that bad, guys?
I know. I love that when you wrote that you're talking, one of the things you said right at the end is it culty? Does it matter? And it's like, no.
No, it doesn't. Like, hey, like, what was it? CrossFit was called a cult a while back. You know what I mean? Like, and it was, if you were a CrossFitter, like everyone was like, it's a cult. But how many people did CrossFit, you know, like CrossFit wasn't my thing, but I've got friends who love it and still love it, and clients who love it and still love it. If it got you from exercising to not exercise, from not exercising to exercising, great. If it's given you an exercise routine that you've stuck to for 2 to 5 years and you're still doing and loving it, great. Doesn't matter that it's culty, not fucking really. Like,
yeah, exactly. There's worse cults.
There's worse cults than CrossFit. No, CrossFit's not a cult. But yeah, there's worse cults than Bryn Johnson's.
Exactly.
Sounds like almost like the one that he came from by the sounds of it.
Right, yeah. Oh, yes.
But we won't go down that rabbit hole on the podcast. But yeah, no. What else? Yeah.
I was just thinking too, sort of one of the last things sort of related to that is how he's also often, it's just like he must get it every day. It's just like, oh, I can't wait till he gets hit by a bus. And it's just like
just online keyboard fucking warriors.
I know. But that sort of raises for me too this idea of, like, again, how you choose to live your life and having the best of your life for as long as you can. So yeah, he could go out tomorrow and get hit by a bus, but he lived a really good life and was mobile and happy and could move his body and had good relationships and had what made him happy up until that moment. And that's sort of, I guess, thinking back to it as like an everyday person scenario, or even thinking about myself. I want to live the best life that I can. And like, I want to, if I'm here into my later years and if I continue to look after myself really well, then yeah, as long as I don't get hit by a bus or fall off a cliff when I'm out on a mountain somewhere and get eaten.
More likely for you than getting hit by a bus.
Wombat eats my face off.
Wombat eats your face. Aww. Wombats are too cute for that, Jess.
Too cute. Maybe I'll fall on a porcupine and it'll like impale me.
We don't have a porcupine. Sorry,
I don't do an echidna. A porcupine.
I love your death scenarios.
Like if I live a long life, like one, I know, like Brian in my own way, and you're the same, we're setting ourselves up ideally for a longer life with how we choose to live our life. Also, I want to go into those longer life years feeling well, feeling healthy, feeling happy. I want to be mobile. I want to be that 70 to 80-year-old still going to the gym and being able to be mobile and lifting weights and not have decline of degenerative diseases because of lifestyle choices. Like, that's really important to me. And I think that's probably, if you asked any person, like, would be pretty ideal. You know, maybe there's some people that out there that just don't care, and that's fine. That's their choice. But like, yeah, I sort of think that sort of concept of like, why would you even bother? Because you could like die tomorrow is just so flawed. It's like, well, flawed. You also may not. So you could live for another
probability of not.
Yeah, exactly. You could live for another sort of 30 years, and because of your lifestyle choices, end up in dialysis and living your life in a hospital. Like, so it kind of comes back to this sort of whole thought pattern around overall preventative health and making good choices. And at the end of the day, again, as you said, he's not hurting anyone. Like, I think what he's doing, if I had to say, is he doing a good thing? I'm like, absolutely. Like, he's sharing it, he's challenging things. Maybe he's making some choices for himself. Like, we don't know where that'll end up for him, but it's only about him. Like, he's really opening people's eyes, and the people that he is having an effect on generally, as you said, with that community he's creating. He's getting people out walking, he's getting people interested in their health. And even if it is using a good quality olive oil over a shitty olive oil,
exactly.
I guess that's also a bonus.
No. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Oh man. People are just I feel like the online space can just be and I think this is why, we've talked about this offline so many times, but this is why I struggle so much with social media and Instagram and just being on there, because of comments and just the hating and just it's just people just need to chill the fuck out. And if it's for the greater good, let it be. If it's not your vibe, don't follow it. It's not hard. Like, you don't, like, that's just the way I look at it. If it's not your vibe, don't worry about it. You don't need to jump on and be a keyboard warrior. You don't need to hate on everyone or it's pretty crazy. But yeah, no, I'm definitely like you. Like, my goals and my long-term health goals are to avoid lifestyle related disease if I can, and hoping that I will by the way that I live my life. And live into my 70s and 80s if I'm lucky and enough to get there in good health. You want to be at the gym, I want to be in a garden. I'll still be climbing up to my tree house. Maybe I won't be a billionaire, but that's okay. I'll have a tree house. And a property somewhere with some animals. But yeah, I still want to be mobile and healthy, but also, like, for me, I want to, and I know we've talked about this, like, just even with like the little people in our lives, like some of them are not so little because I've got tweens in my life and stuff now too. Like, I want a good relationship with them as I get older and they get older, and because they're the next generation down. And even though I don't have children myself, like, they are the next generation down, and they're going to influence their children if they decide to have them. But like, I want them, I just want that to be a good influence for them as well. Like, whether or not they choose to, they don't have to adopt my lifestyle. They may never not. Whatever. I'm not saying my ways has to be done by everyone, just the same as yours doesn't, but just that whole preventative health space and bringing attention and awareness to it. Like, we don't go out preaching it to our family and friends, but we live it. So if that creates a bit of a ripple in our world, awesome. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way I look at it too. Like, I don't tell my family and friends what they do and what they shouldn't do in terms of health and life. And yes, I might be considered extreme to some of them. You know what I mean? Like, and that's cool, but I don't preach it. I don't put it on to people. I just do my thing. And if they want to ask questions, they can ask questions. If they want to come for a fucking walk with me, they can come for a walk with me. Like,
yeah, exactly. Living by example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not always the best example, I'm not going to lie. But anyway, I think we could write my early 20s off as not a good example how to live your life. I find it interesting with Brian's story as well is that he had, like you said earlier, but a lot of these people that do get a big spotlight, whether they create it themselves or they get it purely just due to the noise that they make, and then the spotlight comes on them. That's kind of the same thing. But some people don't necessarily go out looking for it. Like, Brian put himself out to the world, and then the explosion was huge, and he continues to put himself out to the world. I think there's a lot of people that have done amazing things in the preventative health space that come from a certain disease background. Like, Brian obviously comes from quite a big mental health, like obviously unhealthy American diet, but very strong mental health background. Like, he talks about that quite openly. But then there's a lot of people, that have done great things in the preventative health space, and even though, again, they don't always 100% get it right, but their intention is good. They'll publish a book on, and they'll push I know we've talked about this in other podcasts, but the whole paleo movement, like, yes, it has its flaws, but fundamentally underlying it was good. You know what I mean? Like, get rid of the sugar, get rid of the shit, like, stop eating crappy carbs. Like, that's not a bad education message to put through. And, when people started publishing books in that space, like even like Terry Wiles, who had multiple sclerosis, and she was a doctor and came from that, background, and then, changed her diet, changed her life, wrote a book on it, and then started going around speaking and educating about that. Like, there's lots of people similar to Brian's story that have come from a really unhealthy background, have changed their diet. And yes, it might seem extreme to us, like even some of the stuff in some of these protocols of some, like, those things, like they are extreme, but they've worked for these people, so of course they're passionate about them too. So it's just finding that sweet spot for everyday people as well. So
anyway. Yeah, absolutely. Oh man. I feel like we've covered most of the main points from this. Well, I do anyway. Like a lot of it, there was so much going around in my head after watching this, and I was saying to Damien, "You've got to watch this. You've got to watch this." And then he was watching it, and then we talked about it afterwards. I'm like, I really need to talk to Rissi about this. I feel like this is it's a great podcast conversation, but also I was like, it's a good conversation about the documentary because it raises these deeper thoughts and it challenges us to think on a deeper level about what health is, what it means to us, and what I think the more it's almost helped me break it down more talking with you about it. Like I always love that it just comes back to this foundation of like having these pillars of like diet, good diet, movement, and sleep. Like, it's just almost hilarious that, that it all,
at this stage it's just laughable.
It kind of is. I feel like also an example of, and I wish I could remember, I'll find it, guys, and I will put it in the show notes, a link to it. But for the life of me, I can't think of her name. But there was, I think Chris has seen it. I shared it this week on Instagram. There's this amazing lady. She's American and she does these skits. And there's one that she had put up, and I think it's been up for a while. It went viral, of her talking about what you need to do as a perimenopause lady. And she's just speaking with absolute banal tone into the camera about you just got to do this and you've got to have this much amount of protein, and when you do this you've got to blow, and she muses for about a good 90 seconds of like the ridiculous nature of all of the things that you have to do, from fasting to protein intake to and don't do HIIT because you you won't burn fat, but all they need to do, and it's just like this brain dump of like what we're talking about, of that complete overwhelm, and that what we see where people's like, I don't know what to do, this is too much, and at the end of she's like, yeah, it's easy, right? I'm like, it's so good.
True though. It's so true. I actually shared that. I know the exact video. I know exactly who the influencer or the lady is that talks. I'm not sure if she's an influencer, but I know exactly who it is, and because I shared it, I think at some stage last year, I had so many people comment, and I'm like, it's accurate. Sometimes I even listen to all the shit I say to my clients, and I'm like, oh my god, this is too much. Like, just get your protein right and your movement and your sleep.
That's it. No, I think that's it. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. No, I think if you haven't watched it, watch it. We'd be keen to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. And I'd love to hear when you watch it, or if you have watched it, what you thought, and maybe what your thoughts are, even as far as your own well-being and longevity long term. I'd be interested to hear what people think about what's important to them too. But I totally think it's so worth watching. It's
super interesting.
Really interesting. Yeah. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation. I know it's a little different to how we usually do things. Again, we discussed many years ago the What the Health film, which was probably more of a hate discuss because I was so raged.
So enraged by it.
And there has been films come out since then. We were talking about that before we started too. And it's whether that's, sometimes for us, it's it's not even worth talking about. It's just just a rant at the end of the day. But I hope people have really enjoyed the sort of deeper thoughts around this, and has helped people think a little bit about what is important, and hopefully also, as always, given people a little bit of a inspiration and a little bit of strength to do what they want to do for them, as we try and encourage our clients every week in some capacity to put yourself at the top of the pile and do what you need to do for you, and make yourself a priority, because you matter, which is what Bryan is doing in his own way. He matters.
In his own way. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I agree. 100%. Make your own health a priority and carve your own little path, and not everyone's going to love it. But at the end of the day, if you're doing what's right for you and you're creating your own little world of happiness and you've got connection and community with people that, you know, light your soul on fire, what else do you really need? A chef,
LED mask.
LED mask that I sleep in so my skin looks like baby skin. His face does, I'm not going to lie, I know we're finishing up, but his skin does look like so new, right?
It does, doesn't it?
Like,
it
but
does.
also I think that's the lack of sunlight.
Yeah, for sure.
So no UV damage.
I wonder how often he had himself getting microdermabrasion. I was like, I wonder how often he or is it microneedling? So I think it might have been microneedling.
Microneedling.
Yeah, and I was like, I wonder how often he does that.
Yeah. I've done that a few times.
Yeah. That's just like that. How often does Bryan do to get that like porcelain Edward Cullen's skin? Do I want Edward Cullen's skin? And there go the questions.
Yes.
Would I take my niece's plasma and put it into my own body?
I want to know if it helped with his dad's brain. Like they didn't actually say
they didn't go into that.
Or not. I know. That was a bit, brain helped with his thoughts and thought processes. Yeah. It was cool though. His dad was cute. His dad was like just one of those little dads you just want to go and hug.
Yeah. How about his son too? Like they were just like two peas in a pod. That relationship was beautiful.
I feel like his son, I was thinking, again, I know we're trying to finish up and we can go on another fucking tangent. I feel like his son's health will be interesting to track because he started younger before like he hasn't, like obviously he's had the stress of the home life stuff, which everyone who watches the documentary will understand, and the religious side of things and breaking away from that. But he hasn't gone through like the, maybe 10 or however many years that Bryan went through of the standard American diet, the overwork, overstress, alcohol. So his son's actually starting at this pivotal point of, really crazy health. So it'd be interesting to see too what he does with his life. Or with this. Like he's got his dad's drive and entrepreneurial, gene pool, and then he's just got this foot in the door of health. Yeah. Like extreme health. I'm not going to say extreme health, but, next level health, things like, it's wild. Like, imagine if I'm just going to speak for myself. If I bypassed 18 to 26 of all I did to my body and just stepped into this door, like far out, man. But I don't regret any of my decisions. Everything you do makes you far. But this kid has just got his foot in the door from the get-go. He's not going on drinking benders.
No. Or maybe he is at uni and we don't know about it because he's off at university now.
We don't know. I think he'll be a watch this space kind of guy. So anyway, we're going to go.
Did you have any recos before we wrap this up?
My recommendation was watch the documentary.
I know, right? There's this really good documentary on Netflix. Don't Die.
Watch it. Oh dear.
I'm trying to think if I've got any other good recommendations as far as completely removed to this, as far as some good things I've been watching lately, because I always love it when I get a recommendation of what to watch. But I actually can't think of anything besides I've been enjoying the last. Is it the last season? No, there's another season to drop of Outlander.
Oh, you're still on that. Oh my God.
Yes. Damien's given up on it. He's just like, you can watch this without me. And I'm like, just can't let it go.
Yeah, you're kind of like you're hooked on it.
Yeah.
I know I gave up, I think, what season is it up to? Is it season 7?
I think it's the end of 7 now, and I think 8's going to be released soon.
I gave up through 6. I was just like, I'm done, guys.
I've got the Jamie bug. I can't help it.
Yeah, I know you do. I just don't have that Jamie bug. So, I gave up through season 6. Sorry, Jess. So I can't help. I can't even talk to you about it. I don't know what's going on.
Well, yeah, I think our recommendation otherwise than that is to watch this film. Let us know what you think. And other than that, just the usual, we'd love it if you share this episode. We love it when you guys leave us reviews. Really would appreciate it if you haven't done already, even if you're like listening now and you just hit pause and go over and just go tunk and hit the 5 stars. That would be amazing. We'll be having in the next few episodes, you'll start seeing some guests starting to pop up. We've got some interesting research topics that we're going to be discussing. I'm excited about some of the guests that we're starting to get confirmed for the hit list. So expect a really nice treat ahead. And if you guys have anything in particular you'd like us to talk about, just to DM us and let us know. We're open to anything. Obviously, as always.
Obviously, yeah. Anything health related, we shall chat about.
But have, as always, a really fantastic day, evening, weekend, whenever you're listening to this, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.